August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m. Location: Hiroshima, Japan. Event: the first atomic attack in human history. A flash of a moment, and that was the end of an entire city. An atomic bomb named Little Boy from America took the lives of about 140,000 people. Yes, this is not a story. This is true history. In the middle of the 20th century, human history was witnessing an unprecedented catastrophe. A catastrophic fire called World War II crushed the entire world, from the vast steppes of Europe to the deserts of Africa, from the dense jungles of Asia to the turbulent waters of the Pacific Ocean. Power struggles, clashes of ideologies, and the game of bloodshed were going on everywhere. After the fall of Germany and Hitler's suicide in 1945, the war in Europe had calmed down, but the dark clouds of war still hung in the sky of the East. Japan, fierce and somewhat helpless, was still fighting alone against the Allies. They believed in the motto, that is, the honor of a warrior is better than death. Every citizen of Japan, man, woman, child, and old man, became a soldier one by one. They believed that sacrificing their lives for Emperor Hirohito was the ultimate religion. But this indomitable spirit was contradicted by a harsh reality. Japan's economy had collapsed after years of war. Industrial production was almost at zero, and the supply of food, oil, and daily necessities was almost stopped due to the American naval blockade. Still, they were not willing to give up. On the other hand, American scientists were working on a terrible secret in the desert of New Mexico. The Manhattan Project was a huge operation to create the most powerful and destructive weapon in human history. The success of this project was not only the end of World War II, but also the future course of politics in the entire world. A new era was about to begin, the first footsteps of which could be heard in the skies of two Japanese cities. The summer of 1945 was a new struggle for the ordinary people of Japan. Big cities like Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya were being bombed by American B-29 bombers. The night sky was turning red with the fiery rays of fire. Wooden Japanese houses were burned to ashes in an instant. Millions of people were homeless and bereft of relatives. Seeing this terrible situation in big cities, the residents of medium-sized cities like Hiroshima considered themselves somewhat lucky. Hiroshima was an important military and industrial center of Japan. The headquarters of the Japanese Second Army was here. The city's port was very important for transporting troops and military equipment. But despite being so strategically important, Hiroshima still escaped major air raids. The reason for this was a secret American plan. Hiroshima was being kept intact to test the effectiveness of a new weapon. Life in the city might have seemed normal from the outside, but inside there was a suppressed fear and scarcity. Food rationing had reached such a point that the amount of rice allocated for adults was far less than necessary. People grew sweet potatoes, pumpkins, and even vegetables in their backyards, in parks, and even on the roadsides. Children were suffering from malnutrition. Schools had been turned into small factories where students made military equipment. August 6, 1945, was the day for Hiroshima, just like any other 5 days. The city's people went to work at dawn. The children were on their way to school, although their main job was to help demolish houses to create fire lanes in the city center. The purpose was to prevent the fire from spreading quickly in the event of an air raid. What a miracle! A fire 1,000,000 times more terrible than their efforts to escape was waiting for them. It was 7:12 in the morning, an American plane was detected on the Japanese radar system. The plane was a weather reconnaissance plane called the Straight Flash. Its job was to monitor the weather in Hiroshima and send information to the main bombers. The entire city was shaken by the loud sound of the siren. People quickly ran to shelters. An air raid warning was issued on the radio. But after a while, when the plane circled over the city and returned, the Japanese authorities thought it was a normal mission. Thinking that the danger was over, the all-clear siren sounded at 7 a.m. People came out of the shelters and resumed their daily activities. Little did they know that this relief was a prelude to a terrible storm. About 45 minutes later, 3 more American planes entered the skies of Hiroshima. This time, no more sirens sounded. The people of the city below thought that they might be the same harmless planes as before. Some looked up with curiosity. The 3 planes were climbing to an altitude of more than 300 feet, which was beyond the reach of the Japanese anti-aircraft guns of the time. One of these 3 planes was called the Enola Gay, whose pilot, Colonel Paul Tibbets, named the plane after his mother. In the bomb bay of this plane was a giant atomic bomb weighing more than 4 tons, Little Boy. The bomb was released from the Enola Gay at 8:15 and 17 seconds a.m. Little Boy's target was the Ioi Bridge in the center of Hiroshima. It took 43 seconds to fall.
In these 43 seconds, millions of people in Hiroshima were living the last moments of their lives, yet they were completely unaware. Some might have been adoring their children. Some might have been working at their office desks. Some might have been laughing with friends. Little Boy exploded 1,900 feet above. First came an intense, unbearable light. According to eyewitnesses, it was as if 1,000 suns had descended on the earth at once. Those who looked directly at the explosion had their retinas burned forever. The light was immediately followed by a terrible heat. The temperature at the center of the explosion reached millions of degrees Celsius. The temperature above the ground was 3,000 to 4,000 degrees Celsius. In this heat, almost all the people within 1.5 kilometers of the explosion site instantly became ghosts. No trace of them remained. Only the permanent shadows of their bodies on some walls or stones became a silent witness to that terrible moment. The heat was followed by the supersonic shock wave or blast. This gust of wind, traveling at about 1,200 kilometers per hour, blew away concrete buildings like a house of cards. About 90% of the houses within 2 kilometers of the explosion site were completely destroyed. The glass windows shattered and became deadly weapons, which pierced the human body like bullets. 80,000 people in the city center died in the first few seconds. The condition of those who survived was terrible. Their skin was scorched and hung like long ribbons. Their clothes stuck to their bodies. There was only screams, and the silence of death all around. Those who were a little further away were blown away by the blast and died by hitting walls or other objects. Tsutomu Yamaguchi is a 23-year-old engineer. He came to Hiroshima on business that day. At the time of the explosion, he was getting off a tram. He saw a plane and 2 parachutes in the sky. At the last moment, a bright light hit his eyes. He jumped away from the blast. When he regained consciousness, he saw that the left side of his body was severely burned. His eardrums had ruptured. Yamaguchi somehow crawled to a shelter. What he saw around him was the very image of hell. Scorched bodies, scattered limbs, and countless people dying. About 30 minutes after the explosion, a strange rain began to fall from the huge mushroom cloud that had formed over the city. The drops of this rain were large, sticky, and black. It was called black rain. This was no ordinary rain. The explosion mixed the air with a mixture of dust, ash, and deadly radioactive particles from which this rain was created.
Those who drank this rainwater out of thirst, or whose wounds were soaked in this water, were subjected to terrible radiation. This radiation was the cause of thousands of deaths in the following days, months, and years. By the afternoon, Hiroshima had become a moving crematorium. Fires were burning all around, which took the form of a huge firestorm. Many people died from suffocation as a result of absorbing oxygen from the air. Hiroshima was dead that day. Only pain, screams, and the smell of burning flesh remained. After the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, a great confusion arose between the Japanese military leadership and the Tokyo government. All communication with Hiroshima was cut off. All telephone and telegraph lines were down. Radio stations were silent. Tokyo officials only knew that a major attack had taken place in Hiroshima, but they had no idea of its horror. A young Japanese military officer was sent to assess the situation. When he reached the skies of Hiroshima by plane, what he saw was beyond his imagination. A city that had been alive and well had been reduced to a vast charred ruin, which was still going on. He wrote only this in his report, that the city of Hiroshima was completely destroyed. But the hardline military leaders of Japan were still refusing to accept the reality. They thought that America might have used some new type of powerful but conventional or familiar bomb. They could not even think of surrendering.
For them, the honor of the country was greater than human life. On the other hand, in America, President Harry Truman announced in a statement to the countrymen that America had dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. He warned Japan that if they did not surrender, their cities would be rained down with destruction the likes of which the world had never seen before. But the Japanese government did not respond. They were hoping for an honorable agreement through the Soviet Union. They did not know that the Soviet Union was also preparing to declare war on them. Tsutomu Yamaguchi, despite being terribly injured, somehow managed to get on a train to his hometown of Nagasaki. He wanted to return to his family. His body was wrapped in bandages. The pain was unbearable. But he did not know that fate, something even more terrible, awaited him. American military commanders were preparing to drop a second atomic bomb. The next target on their list was the city of Kokura, where Japan had a large garrison. Nagasaki was an alternate target. On August 9, 1945, another B-29 bomber named Boxcar flew over Japan with the second atomic bomb, Flat Man. Fat Man was a more powerful bomb than Little Boy. It was a plutonium implantation device. The pilot of Boxcar was Major Charles Sweeney. When they reached the sky, they saw the city shrouded in clouds and smoke. After repeated circling, they failed to see the target. They were running out of fuel. Finally, Major Sweeney decided to turn the plane towards Nagasaki, the alternate target. In a cruel twist of fate, the city of Kokura was spared that day because of the clouds, and Nagasaki, which was not the main target, was targeted for death. Nagasaki was one of the most beautiful port cities in Japan. Surrounded by mountains, the city's Uruoka Valley was home to the largest cathedral in Asia, the Uruoka Cathedral, the center of Japan's Christian community. It was also home to the huge Mitsubishi arms and shipbuilding plant, a key target for the Allies. It was 11:01 on August 9th. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was describing the horrors of Hiroshima to his office manager in Nagasaki. He was talking about how a single bomb could destroy an entire city. His boss dismissed his words as the ravings of a madman. At that moment, the window in his room was illuminated by a bright white light. Yamaguchi immediately fell to the ground. Experience in Hiroshima had taught him what to do. The sheer force of the explosion shattered everything in the room at the perfect moment. The boxcars were also facing a thick cloud cover in the Nagasaki sky, but at the last moment, through a small gap in the clouds, they could see the industrial area of the city. The pilot pinpointed the target and ordered the bomb to be dropped. At 11 a.m.,
Fat Man exploded over Nagasaki's volcanic valley. Although Fat Man was more powerful than Little Boy, Nagasaki's topography, a valley surrounded by mountains, limited the impact of the explosion. The damage was largely confined to the volcanic valley, but the devastation was greater than that of Hiroshima. Everything within a kilometer of the explosion site was instantly obliterated. Many people gathered at the volcanic cathedral that day to pray. They all died. The traditional cathedral was reduced to rubble. The factories of Mitsubishi were razed to the ground. An estimated 40,000 to 70,000 people died instantly. Tsutomu Yamaguchi survived again. This time, however, the other part of his body was burned. He was the only person in world history officially recognized as having survived 2 atomic bombings. The images of Nagasaki's devastation were as heartbreaking as Hiroshima. Scorched bodies, people buried under rubble, and cries for help. The 2 cities had become a laboratory for the nuclear age within 3 days. The second atomic bomb attack on Nagasaki and the Soviet Union's invasion of Manchuria on the same day, these 2 events completely cornered the Japanese military leadership. They understood that continuing the war meant the complete destruction of Japan. There was a sharp disagreement in the Japanese Supreme War Council. A group of hardline military officers were still strongly opposed to surrender. They were in favor of continuing the war until the last Japanese were alive. On the other hand, the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister realized that there was no other way but to stop now. For the first time in history, Emperor Hirohito of Japan intervened to break this deadlock. In Japanese culture, the emperor was considered equivalent to a god. His word was the final law. Emperor Hirohito called his ministers and said, "We must endure this intolerable situation and pave the way for peace."